Have you ever felt like you were just the background character in everyone else's life? I have. At 30, I wasn't traveling the world or chasing dreams. I was paying my family's bills while trying not to fall apart. But when I woke up in a hospital bed after a serious accident, the thing that hurt the most wasn't my injuries. It was realizing that my own family had boarded a plane for a vacation using tickets I paid for without even looking back. That was the moment everything changed. That was the day I finally chose myself. My name is Jenna, and by the time I turned 30, I was already the glue holding everyone together. Not by choice, but by necessity. While most of my friends in Denver were out chasing promotions or planning weekend getaways, I was juggling overdue utility bills and grocery lists that didn't even belong to me. Every Sunday started the same. That weekend, I was folding laundry when my phone lit up. "Jenna, sweetheart?" Micah's therapist invoice came in, my mom said, her voice a blend of guilt and routine. She didn't have to finish the sentence. I already knew what came next. I pinched the bridge of my nose and pulled up my banking app. "How much this time, Mom?" That was our dance. She'd call, I'd pay, and no one would talk about the growing resentment pressing down on my chest like a boulder. Micah, my older brother by 4 years, hadn't worked in nearly a year. A rough patch was what they called it, but for me it was more like a storm I never got to leave. They never asked how I was managing. No one questioned how I could cover rent, work overtime at a digital branding agency, and still foot their expenses. I had stopped asking myself that, too. People think responsibility makes you strong, but when it's piled on without choice, it doesn't feel like strength. It feels like drowning in silence, waving from beneath the surface, hoping someone finally notices. You're tired of swimming alone. My brother Micah is 4 years older than me, and according to my parents, he's just been going through a rough spell. That's how they explain everything, like a gentle breeze instead of the tornado it really is. But the truth? Micah didn't just stumble, he imploded. It started last fall when he was passed over for a regional director role at his company here in Denver. I remember sitting across from him at my kitchen table, still in my work blazer, while he paced and ranted. "They gave it to Kevin," he snapped, tossing his phone down like it had personally betrayed him. "You know how long I've been there, Jenna? How much I've sacrificed?" Before I could say anything, he added, "I quit. I told them to shove it." I stared at him, stunned. Not because he was angry, that was normal, but because he actually walked away with nothing lined up. He burned the bridge so fast, the ashes were still floating when I got his next call. I kept thinking he'd bounce back, give it a few weeks, apply around, maybe find something better suited. But weeks turned into months, and suddenly nearly a year had gone by. According to my parents, he was just being selective. According to my bank account, he was draining the life out of me. Micah had conditions, you see. He wouldn't apply unless the job offered remote flexibility, equity shares, unlimited paid time off, and a collaborative culture. That last one, his excuse for ghosting interviews. And while he scrolled LinkedIn from the comfort of our childhood home, I was buried in deadlines and freelance contracts to keep everyone afloat. What stung most wasn't the money. It was that I was expected to carry his fall, while everyone else tiptoed around his ego like it was made of glass. And mine was just expected to be unbreakable. After nearly a year of putting out fires that weren't mine, I realized something had to give. The constant juggling, my job, the bills, Micah's therapy costs had left me running on fumes. I couldn't remember the last time I had done something just for me. That's when the idea of a trip first surfaced. Not a local escape, not a weekend off, something big, something meaningful. I had always dreamed of visiting Rome. It sat quietly on a list I made back in college, scribbled in the corner of a notebook next to learn to make fresh pasta. That list had gathered dust over the years, buried under adulthood. But one night, sitting at my desk long after midnight, I opened my laptop and typed Rome into the search bar, just to see, just to feel something other than tired. A few clicks turned into hours of planning. I imagined strolling through cobblestone alleys with my parents, watching Mom's face light up as she tasted authentic pecorino for the first time. She used to talk about that cheese tastings in Italy, as if it were a fantasy. For Dad, I found a private wine tour in the countryside, just outside Lazio. He loved a bold red after dinner, always sipping slowly like he was trying to taste every memory. I even chose the perfect hotel in Trastevere, tucked between ivy-covered buildings and street musicians. Warm light, a small terrace, and breakfast served on the balcony. It felt like something out of a film. For weeks I poured myself into it. Every reservation, every little detail. I thought, maybe if I can just give them this, then maybe we'd have one memory untouched by stress or sacrifice. One stretch of time where I didn't have to be the fixer, the wallet, the quiet support system. This wasn't just a vacation, it was hope stitched together with spreadsheets and confirmations. A dream I was finally daring to chase, even if it meant I had to carry everyone else there to see it come true. The morning before our flight to Rome, I woke up with a sense of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. My suitcase was already packed and zipped by the door. The itinerary I spent weeks crafting was printed, highlighted, and tucked neatly into my purse. All I had left to do was meet a new client downtown for a final presentation, then head straight to the airport from there. I remember adjusting the volume on the car stereo, humming along to an old jazz playlist while navigating the snow-melted streets of Denver. My thoughts drifted, picturing Mom in a sun hat, Dad swirling wine in a vineyard, the three of us laughing over a shared pasta dish on a quiet Roman street. That was the last clear moment. A green light, a glance at the street sign, then impact, a deafening screech of tires, a blur of silver metal, and silence. When I opened my eyes, everything was blurred at the edges. My limbs felt heavy, like someone had packed my bones with sand. Sirens wailed in the distance, voices urgent and echoing. Someone was holding my wrist. Checking for a pulse? I tried to speak, but my mouth wouldn't cooperate. The next memory is of a hospital ceiling. Then white lights. Machines humming softly. My throat burned as I swallowed, and pain radiated down my left side like fire. "You're lucky," the nurse said gently, adjusting my IV. "That car hit you pretty hard. You're going to need time." I didn't feel lucky. I felt hollow. The worst part wasn't the pain or the bruises or the surgical tape itching my ribs. It was the quiet absence of everything I had been clinging to. The trip. The escape. The one piece of joy I had carved out of a hard year. Lying there in that hospital bed, reality settled like dust. Whatever version of the future I had imagined ended at that intersection. And everything after that? I would have to rebuild from nothing. I was still groggy from the anesthesia when they walked in. The pain meds dulled the throbbing in my ribs, but nothing could dull what came next. My mom entered first, clutching the same beige crossbody bag she'd bought specifically for the Rome trip. The sight of it made my stomach twist. Dad followed quietly behind her, and Micah trailed after them, sipping from a hospital coffee cup like he had all the time in the world. "I'm so sorry," I rasped, my voice hoarse from the breathing tube. "We'll have to cancel everything. I'll call the hotel as soon as I'm able." I expected maybe a look of concern, or even just a sigh of disappointment. Instead, my mom offered a soft smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, sweetheart, don't worry about any of that," she said, adjusting her purse strap like we were discussing brunch plans. "Your father and I talked it over. We've decided to go ahead with the trip." My breath caught. I blinked, sure I'd misheard. "What?" "You need to stay here and heal, and since you can't come," she continued, glancing over at Micah, "we'll take your brother instead. He could really use the break." Micah nodded, like it was the most logical thing in the world. "You were supposed to check on the house while we were gone," he said matter-of-factly. "You'll have to hire someone, just make sure they're reliable." I couldn't speak. My mouth was open, but no words came. They stood there, making small talk about passport holders and neck pillows as if I weren't lying in a hospital bed with fresh stitches and a swollen IV line. I searched their faces for something: compassion, guilt, even recognition, but found only convenience. Then they turned to go. "We'll send photos," Mom said cheerfully, like she was signing off a postcard. The door clicked shut behind them, and suddenly, the room felt impossibly empty. I stared at the ceiling, listening to the beep of the monitor and the distant shuffle of nurses' shoes in the hallway. The betrayal hit deeper than any injury I'd sustained. I hadn't just been left behind. I'd been replaced. In the very escape I'd planned, one that was meant to bring us closer, they had carved me out of the picture without hesitation. And all I could do was lie there, stunned, wondering how long it had been since I was seen as anything more than a solution to someone else's problem. I stared at the door long after it closed, as if somehow willing it to open again would make them come back and realize how wrong this all was. But they didn't. They had already moved on, literally rolling their suitcases down the hospital corridor on their way to catch a flight I had booked. I turned my head slowly and reached for the nurse call button, When she arrived, I asked in a whisper, "Could you please get my phone? It should be with my things." A few minutes later, she handed me a clear hospital bag. I dug through it with shaking hands, finding my phone at the bottom, thankfully still intact. I turned it on and stared at the lock screen. It was a picture of the three of us from last Thanksgiving. I didn't even hesitate. I deleted it and set the background to a blank sky blue. Then I opened my email. The Rome trip folder was still there. Each subject line was another reminder: hotel confirmation, wine tour itinerary, Trastevere cruise booking. My thumb hovered over the first one. If I was nothing more than their travel coordinator, then fine, I'd finish the job. I started with the hotel. A few clicks, a short email, and the 3-night stay at the ivy-covered boutique hotel was gone. Next, I canceled Mom's cheese tasting tour. Then the private driver for Dad's vineyard day, the rooftop dinner reservation I booked weeks in advance, canceled. One after another, the experiences disappeared. The plans I'd spent months assembling unraveled in a matter of minutes. With each cancellation, I felt a strange mix of loss and clarity. The final thing was the return flights. I hesitated longer this time, my thumb hovering above the cancel reservation button. I imagined them landing in Rome, tired and expecting luxury, only to realize they had nowhere to sleep and no plans to follow. I pressed the button. Done. Then I placed the phone face down on the tray beside my bed and closed my eyes. I hadn't expected to feel calm, but that's what it was. Not revenge, not even satisfaction, just silence finally. They had walked away without looking back, assuming I would still hold everything together. But for once, I let it fall, and somewhere deep inside, something shifted. They chose their vacation. I chose myself. The first message came at 2:17 a.m. My phone vibrated softly against the bedside tray, its screen lighting up the dark hospital room. I didn't check it right away. I didn't need to. I already knew who it was. By the time breakfast arrived, there were 7 missed calls. By mid-morning, 14. The tone shifted with each one, like they were trying to figure out which version of me might pick up. Sympathetic, guilty, maybe still exhausted enough to cave. I didn't answer. Instead, I grabbed a pen from the nurse's station and flipped over the back of the hospital's lunch menu. I drew 3 columns: calls, texts, voicemails. It started as a joke, but quickly turned into something more. A record. A receipt of everything they thought I still owed them. By noon, I'd tallied 32 missed calls and 23 texts. Micah's came first. Short, accusatory. "This is petty, Jenna. We're stranded because of you. We're standing in the hotel lobby with our luggage and no reservation. This is messed up." Then came Mom's. "Jenna, we are disappointed in you. After everything we've done, you leave us like this? Is this what family means to you now?" Dad's were fewer, but all capitalized, like he was shouting through the phone. "Fix this. Your mother is crying." Each message stacked on top of the last, like a pile of guilt bricks meant to rebuild the cage I'd finally stepped out of. I didn't respond. I didn't even flinch. I just kept adding to the tally. By the time my nurse came by for the evening rounds, my list had grown past the edge of the menu. She glanced at it, then at me. "That your to-do list?" "Something like that," I said, tucking it under my tray. When the voicemails reached 19, curiosity got the best of me. I played one. It was Micah again, voice tight with frustration. "I hope you're happy. We've been walking around all day trying to find a decent place to stay. Mom's exhausted, Dad's pissed. You seriously left us out here with nothing. Real classy." I deleted it. They weren't asking if I was okay, not once. Not even a simple, "How are you feeling?" Just demands, accusations, pressure. But none of it touched me the way it used to. Because when I looked at that long list of missed calls, I didn't see obligation. I saw proof that the only time they chased me was when I stopped carrying them. On the 3rd day after surgery, just as I started to believe the silence in my room might swallow me whole, someone knocked, slightly, almost hesitantly, on the doorframe. "Room for contraband?" a familiar voice whispered. I looked up to see Carmen from the content team, holding a paper cup with a green sleeve and a guilty smile. Behind her stood Leo from web design, holding a pastry box like it was a peace offering. "You didn't think we'd let you survive on mystery meat and applesauce, did you?" They stepped in, filling the sterile space with warmth and the smell of real coffee. I hadn't even realized how much I needed it. Not the caffeine, but the reminder that someone remembered me as more than a problem to solve. The next day, it was Tasha and Greg from Analytics, bringing a stack of gossip magazines and the latest office drama. Apparently, someone used Comic Sans in a client deck and nearly caused a mutiny. Then came Julia, my manager, with a bouquet of sunflowers and a promise. "You're not falling behind. We've got this covered." They came one by one, sometimes in pairs, never staying too long but always leaving something behind. Laughter, snacks, a feeling I didn't quite recognize at first. Care, real, uncomplicated care. They weren't checking in because they needed something. They weren't tracking what I could do for them. They were just there because they wanted me to know I wasn't forgotten. For the first time in a long time, I felt held without expectation, and somewhere between the second croissant and the fourth sarcastic joke about office politics, it hit me. Maybe I hadn't lost everything. Maybe, just maybe, I was finally beginning to see who had truly been in my corner all along. It happened on a Thursday morning, just after my physical therapist left the room. I had taken 5 slow steps from the bed to the window without assistance, and for the first time in weeks, I felt proud, a quiet kind of proud, the kind you hold close like a secret. I was still sore, still stitched, but standing. I didn't hear them coming, just the sudden jarring sound of wheels scraping the linoleum floor, luggage rolling too quickly down the corridor, and then, without a knock, the door burst open. My mother stepped in first, hair a mess, sunglasses perched uselessly on her head. She still wore the same linen pants and jacket I had picked out for her Rome packing list. "How dare you?" she said, her voice trembling not from pain, but fury. Behind her came Micah, dragging his suitcase like a prop in a performance, his jaw clenched so tightly I thought his teeth might crack. Dad stood in the doorway, arms crossed, his silence louder than anything. I didn't move. I was still gripping the metal rail by the window, steadying myself, the irony of that not lost on me. "You abandoned us," Mom continued, storming closer to my bed. "We were stranded, humiliated, after everything." "Jenna," Micah threw his arms up, motioning around the room. "Look at her. Private room, 3 meals a day, nurses on standby, and we're out there sleeping in a motel that smells like wet carpet." I blinked, stunned not by their arrival, but by the audacity of their complaint. Nurse Amber stepped between us before I could respond. "I'm going to ask you to lower your voices," she said firmly. "This is a recovery ward, not a debate stage." But they didn't hear her. Or didn't care. Micah kept going. "You're not the victim here, Jenna. You ruined a once-in-a-lifetime trip, and for what? So you could make a point?" Something inside me cracked. I straightened, letting go of the support rail. My legs wobbled, but I stood tall. "No," I said quietly. "Let's talk about ruining things." The room fell silent. "For the last year, I've paid your bills, covered the rent, bought your groceries. I worked overtime to make sure Mom could keep her therapy appointments. I transferred money every time the lights were about to be shut off." I turned to Micah. "And you? You sat on the couch applying to jobs that offered free yoga classes and Friday nap hours pretending you were being selective. You rejected reality while I held everything together." Mom opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. "I planned this trip. I paid for the hotel, the tours, every last detail. It was supposed to be a gift. A thank you. And then I got hit by a car. Needed emergency surgery, nearly died. And what did you do? No one answered. You left me. You picked up your bags and walked out of this hospital to sip wine in a foreign country with the one person who hasn't lifted a finger in a year." Dad looked away. Micah's face burned, but he didn't say a word. "And then Mom did the unthinkable. We didn't know if you'd still be able to travel," she said flatly. "You might have ended up disabled. That's why we thought it was better to go while everything was still usable." Usable. That was the word that finally killed whatever was left of me. Without breaking eye contact, I reached for the nurse call button and pressed it. "Yes, Jenna," Amber's voice came through the speaker. "Can you please send security to my room? I need 3 people escorted out and added to my restricted visitors list." My mother's mouth fell open. "You're joking." But I wasn't. 2 security officers arrived within minutes. One of them stepped in front of me as if I needed protection. I didn't. "This patient is recovering from major trauma," he said firmly. "We're going to have to ask you to leave." As they were let out, Mom shouted something about betrayal. Micah muttered under his breath. Dad said nothing. Their voices faded as they moved down the hall, and for the first time in years, so did their power. I sat back on the bed, shaking from adrenaline, but lighter than I'd felt in a long, long time. Not broken, just finally done. 3 days after security escorted my family out, the hospital room finally felt like mine. No more angry messages, no more guilt trips in digital disguise, just the soft hum of machines, the occasional shuffle of nurses' shoes, and the rare, unfiltered quiet I didn't realize I had been missing for years. I spent those days healing not just my ribs and stitches, but something deeper, something that had been bruised long before the crash. Without my phone constantly buzzing, the silence wrapped around me like a warm coat. For once, I didn't have to brace for impact. No emotional grenades waiting behind every notification. My medical team said I was making faster progress than expected. The physical therapy was painful, sure, but I leaned into it. Every inch of progress felt like reclaiming part of myself. By the end of the second week, I could walk short distances without help. I could laugh without wincing. I could breathe without the weight of someone else's expectations pressing against my chest. Then came the discharge papers. It was surreal packing up what little I had: a book, a half-used notepad, a pair of slippers. No family to sign me out, no cheerful ride home waiting. But as I stepped out of the elevator and into the Colorado sunlight, I didn't feel abandoned. I felt free. When I opened the door to my apartment, I almost cried. Not because of what was there, but because of what wasn't. No chaos, no mess, just peace. Someone had been there. The dishes were done. The trash was out. There were fresh tulips in a vase on the kitchen table. A sticky note on the fridge in Carmen's handwriting read, "Welcome home, Jay, we've got your back." The fridge was stocked. There were even ice cream pints labeled with days of the week. Thursday was Rocky Road. I didn't hear from my parents, not directly at least, but the family grapevine buzzed back to life within a month. Texts from cousins, a voicemail from my aunt, screenshots of Facebook posts. My mother had gone public. She'd written some melodramatic status about raising an ungrateful daughter who turned her back on her family in their time of need. She played it like a soap opera. Sick parents, jobless brother, abandoned vacation dreams. It was all there, except for the truth. What she didn't expect was the comments. My cousin Elise replied first, "You left Jenna in a hospital bed to sip wine in Rome with Micah, who hasn't worked in over a year. Let's not pretend you're the victims here." Then came Julia, then Omar, then Melissa. They told their versions, how they'd watched me work 2 jobs, how I'd supported my family without complaint, how they had visited me in the hospital when my own parents didn't. 3 days later, the post was gone, but by then screenshots had made the rounds. The mask had slipped, and there was no putting it back on. I never answered any of their new messages. I didn't respond to the flowers they sent, or the guilt-laced texts, or the emails written like apologies but soaked in manipulation. Instead, I focused on recovery. My legs grew steadier, my back stopped aching when I stood too long. I started working part-time from home, then gradually returned to the office. The day I walked in without my cane was the day everything felt real. My coworkers were waiting. A giant banner across my desk read, "Welcome back, boss lady." There was cake, laughter, and the sense that I had been missed, not because of what I could do for them, but because of who I was. That night, I sat on the couch with a fork in one hand and leftover cake in the other, scrolling through travel websites. On a whim, I typed, "Rome again." Same boutique hotel, same cheese tour, same vineyard day trip. Only this time, I selected one room, one seat, one name. Mine. The confirmation email hit my inbox a minute later. No fanfare, no celebration, just a quiet notification that something I had once given away now belonged only to me. As the sun dipped beyond the Denver skyline, I closed my laptop and let the stillness settle in. I had spent years tying my worth to being dependable, to being useful, to being the person who kept everything running. But now I was learning to be whole just for myself. Not broken, not bitter, just beginning. I thought the silence meant they had finally let it go, but nothing stays buried for long in my family, not when there's an audience. It started with a phone call from my cousin Lila. I let it go to voicemail, but her text came through seconds later. "Hey, have you seen Aunt Naomi's Facebook post?" I hadn't. I didn't even have her notifications turned on anymore. But curiosity eventually won. When I logged in, there it was. 4 paragraphs of dramatics pinned to the top of her page. Sometimes, as parents, we do everything we can for our children, and still they turn away. My heart is broken. Our family has struggled this past year, and in our time of need, our daughter chose silence over support. We are hurt, we are grieving, and we pray she finds her way back to us. The post had over 70 comments already. People who didn't know the full story chimed in with sympathy. "So sorry, Naomi. Kids these days have no loyalty. Sending love and strength. Hope she comes around. Family is everything." I scrolled, half expecting more of the same, until I saw my cousin Elise's name pop up. Her comment was short, but it hit like a match to dry brush. "You left Jenna alone in a hospital bed after her accident and took Micah to Rome instead. That's not heartbreak, that's abandon." Then came Lucas from Chicago, and Dina from Boston. One by one, the people who did know what happened added their voices. They told the truth, how I supported my parents for a year, how I covered Micah's therapy, how I paid for the trip they took without me. Naomi didn't respond, but the post vanished within hours. Not before screenshots made it to the extended family group chat. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The people who mattered already knew. And the ones who didn't? I no longer felt responsible for educating them. For the first time in my life, I let the truth speak for itself. No explanations, no justifications. Just silence, and somehow that silence held more weight than every word they had ever thrown at me. Let them tell their stories. I was finally living mine. 4 months later, I stepped off the plane at Leonardo da Vinci Airport with nothing but a carry-on, a crossbody bag, and a heart that finally felt light. Rome smelled like espresso and possibility. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting soft gold across the cobblestones outside the terminal. It felt surreal, walking out alone into a city I once imagined visiting with my parents, now reclaiming it entirely for myself. A driver held a sign with my name on it, Ms. Jenna Walsh. I smiled as I approached him. No one had ever called me Ms. anything outside a bill or a court notice, but here, it sounded like freedom. My hotel was everything I remembered from the listing. Small, tucked between 2 shuttered art galleries in Trastevere, with ivy crawling up the walls and a terrace that overlooked the narrow street below. The room was bright, the linens crisp, and the balcony table was already set for one. I spent my days exactly how I wanted. I took the cheese tour Mom had once begged for, savoring every sample without pretending to enjoy her favorites. I strolled through the vineyard Dad never got to see, sipping bold reds in silence without having to explain my thoughts. I explored alleyways alone. I got lost on purpose. I didn't post photos. I didn't tag my location. This wasn't for anyone else. On the 3rd night, I sat at a small outdoor cafe, a bowl of carbonara in front of me and a glass of Montepulciano in hand. I watched people pass by, laughing, strolling, living. I pulled out my phone, opened the photo gallery, and deleted the last remaining picture of my family. Then I took a new one. The view from my seat, the untouched pasta, the soft lights strung overhead. A beginning. Later that night, I opened my laptop just to check the calendar. I wasn't ready to go home yet, so I booked 2 more days. No itinerary this time, just space. It turns out peace doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it arrives in quiet decisions. Booking a single seat, finishing a solo meal, walking alone through a foreign city and feeling not lonely but full. For the first time in my life, I wasn't escaping anything. I was just living. And that was more than enough.